What's your take on Gary Gensler's ruling, or his intent with the settlement with Kraken?
Yeah, I mean, I think that first and foremost, we're seeing all those regulatory actions, right, being taken against some of the more prominent players in the U.S. market. And in some regards, it basically drives the investors and it drives the public from operating in the U.S. market and drives them outside, right? Basically, offshore entities. But as we've seen already with FTX, those entities are less secure, or they are less basically susceptible to U.S. regulators enforcing consumer protections.
Doesn't it make sense, though, that staking as a service, especially offered by an exchange, that seems like a security?
I think it's difficult to basically assess what exactly it is, right? And if we will take a step back, I think that in many regards, we sort of operating from a rule book that is suited for horses, and now we have cars, right? And we basically need to change the rule book because, staking in some regards is sort of like installing solar panels and contribute electricity to the grid and then getting something in return. And I'm not sure if it's exactly a security or not, right? I think there should be certain protections, right? There should be certain disclosures. Now, the main issue is that the U.S. regulators are not progressing fast enough and providing the guidance to the industry of how exactly we should deliver those services, unlike regulators abroad that are actually moving in a very rapid pace in terms of providing guidance and regulatory clarity on what each one of those activities actually means and how we should protect consumers.
How big of a deal of this is this for Ethereum in particular, given the move to the proof-of-stake model? Does it significantly impact the ability for it to scale when so many exchanges are facing this threat of the SEC?
It's a good question, but I think that overall, as we've seen in crypto for the last couple of years, right, it's a very global system, right? So if something is actually banned in China or something is actually banned in the United States, the activity very quickly moves to different jurisdictions, right? When there is clarity, it's allowed. So maybe there is a temporary setback for the stability, which I'm not sure is actually, we are seeing it right now, but I'm pretty confident that if this stability is actually exists, it will basically be rebalanced offshore in some jurisdictions like Europe, APAC, where this activity is clear and it's allowed.
I guess one other question I have is how much does it matter that Gary Gensler is coming down so hard? You mentioned you're not sure if it's staking is a security or not, but Gary Gensler is pretty clear when he says that it is. We're going to watch these legal battles start to play out, but that will take a long time. Do you think that the companies that are operating the space have enough dry powder to make it through that time onto the other end of this fight where they may or may not win?
Look, I think that overall, the losers in this fight is, first of all, the American public and the American economy, right? Because all those companies and all those investors eventually has the opportunity to go and operate in jurisdictions like Singapore, like Australia, like Europe, like APAC, like the UAE, and they're all basically pushing ahead with providing a pretty warm regulatory infrastructure, right, for those companies to operate, right? Effectively, what it does, it sets the U.S. infrastructure for this transformational wave of using digital assets, of using the crypto rails. It's setting it back, right? Because companies will operate abroad.
Well, but what's the alternative, especially after the collapse of FTX and Voyager and Genesis and you name it? I mean, investors are getting burned left and right, and not just for a few $100,000 or a few million, or it's like billions of dollars that are just being eviscerated. Yeah. So we can't just set up a friendly regulatory structure and continue to see these kind of losses.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm advocating for not doing anything or for a friendly, over-friendly regulatory structure. Right? I think that what needs to happen is basically not to basically structure everything as a security, right? There are two frameworks, right? Some frameworks, as we've seen in Singapore and Australia, right, where there is one government agency that basically takes ownership. They learn the topic, they engage with the industry, they decide what are the appropriate consumer protection measures, and they basically move forward with them. There is another model, for example, in the UAE, which they actually set up a dedicated agency that regulates crypto, right? And I think both of those models work, right? What is happening right now is sort of unclear, and it seems to be much more political, right, and an aftermath that instead of constructive measures.